Hello and welcome to the Read to Know podcast, where the goal is to actually remember what you read so then you can better apply it to your life. On this podcast, we go through a book one chapter at a time, and then we actually practice remembering what we've read. So if you want to follow along, we're currently working our way through Bob Goff's book, Dream Big. I'm Zach Brown, and my friend Chris Yarber is joining me to help discuss and break down this book. Also, if you're on Apple Podcasts, it would be huge if you left a rating and review for us. It would help out a ton. If you're not on Apple Podcasts, no worries. Just send this to a friend who might be interested. Anyway, thanks again for listening and enjoy the conversation.
So, Zach, we are in day 19, chapter 19 of this daily podcast adventure of Bob Goff's Dream Big. And today we're looking at a chapter entitled Hostage Negotiation. And I say that to read the subtitle because when I read the subtitle first, something came to my mind. The subtitle is Figure Out What's Holding You Back. And you remember a couple days ago when we had a roller coaster conversation here on the podcast? Okay. So I think I've discovered what's holding me back from the whole roller coaster situation. Because for me, what's scary about being on a roller coaster is not the speed, it's not the openness, it's not the air, but it's the height. It's the height of it. Honestly, if a roller coaster, and I've been on roller coasters that are not very tall, and I'm fine. They're fun. But it's the ones that, and then you go down real hard. And I think it's from one time when I was living in Virginia, my parents, we went to a lighthouse and we were climbing the stairs in the lighthouse, and you had windows on the side that you could look out. And I remember I got more and more nervous as we went up. And then when we made it to the top, I could hardly even hold on to the railing or anything. I just wanted to back up and go back downstairs. So honestly, I think that's where it's holding me back.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that makes sense. I mean, even, I'm not necessarily afraid of heights, but even any time that I've been up in a really tall building with a big window, or even, any kind of thing where I've been up really high and you look down, it's kind of nauseating looking that far down. So I understand that sentiment, and that does kind of tie in to what we're talking about today. We're actually in part 4 now. We made it to part 4 of this book. This part is called Clear the Path. And this chapter is called Hostage Negotiation, Figure Out What's Holding You Back. And really, if I could sum it up, it's really talking about limiting beliefs. That's what we're talking about here. And if you've ever read anything by Michael Hyatt, if you're familiar with Michael Hyatt at all, he's written a few books, like Your Best Year Ever, Living Forward, both great books, but he talks a lot about limiting beliefs as well. He talks about limiting beliefs, and it's kind of a similar idea to that. It's kind of similar even as well to what Stephen Covey was talking about back in 7 Habits about scripts, right? The scripts that we may get from others, or the scripts that we place on ourselves when they're kind of holding us back and they're not true to who we could be.
Yeah. To me, limiting beliefs is a little difficult to define because it can be so broad. And Bob even says in this chapter that limiting beliefs can really be a number of things. But he says in here that a lot of our current failures probably connect to past failures. And maybe a lot of fears that we have now also connect to past fears as well. And so because of certain situations, relationships, routines, habits in our life, we develop these limiting beliefs that really do, in a sense, hold us hostage, as he says here. And but they're a little bit hard to define. I'd be interested to read Hyatt, like you said, to see what he has to say about it, because sometimes it can be a little general.
Right. Yeah. He goes through, I think it's multiple chapters long. He goes through talking about identifying limiting beliefs and then figuring out then what you can replace that limiting belief with.
Right.
And so, yeah, it takes, like Bob is talking about here in this chapter, it takes some work to kind of figure out what those are and then what you're going to do about them.
Yeah.
And what I've found when I've thought about limiting beliefs myself is that they are hard to kind of determine and quantify because that's what it is. It's a belief. You know what I mean? It's something that you subconsciously or unconsciously to some level believe about yourself.
Right.
And actually figuring out and taking that apart and being like, this is something that I kind of believe, but it might not be true. It doesn't necessarily have to be true.
Right.
And
we oftentimes see it, I guess, manifest in different ways. He talks about, I know this is kind of towards the end of the chapter, but he talks about fear being one of the biggest ones, kind of like the illustration that we opened up with. But a lot of these limiting beliefs are kind of like in here. He has an illustration about keys that he uses, that him and his wife have a drawer of keys and they just don't want to throw those keys away. And at one time they served a purpose, but they no longer serve a purpose. And I guess the same could be true about our limiting beliefs. They really don't serve a purpose. And so really we need to do that's where a lot of this self-reflection and self-thought can come into play, because we can analyze those, look back and just notice, hey, we don't really need this anymore. We don't need to hold on to this, because really it's holding us back. Right.
Yeah. And, like he says, that manifests in different ways, usually like laziness or procrastination or, something to that effect. So I think maybe the way to go about trying to find these and trying to pinpoint these is maybe, again, going back to even one of those chapters early on in this book where he talks about just looking at why you do what you do. You need to look at it. Why did I do that? You know what I mean? Let's backtrack here. So, when it comes to, maybe you're procrastinating on this thing. Why am I doing that? Do I think that and maybe ask yourself the questions of, am I procrastinating on this because I just don't want to do it? Or am I procrastinating because there's a bigger reason here for it? Whether it's that I feel like I can't be successful at this, like I'm not good enough to be doing this anyway, or, something, or I don't have the skills required to, I'm undeserving of this, any of those things. So yeah, limiting beliefs are kind of a tricky thing to tackle. And I don't think, again, it's one of those things that we're kind of never done with. But he says here in this chapter that the people who are successful, and again, I don't like to use the word successful in a way because, success is different to every person. But, those people who are successful are ones who are able to identify these things in their lives and then tackle them head on.
Right. And I think that's definitely one reason why they are successful, because you're right. We're not talking successful as in we make a lot of money, or, we drive a certain car, or we wear certain clothes. That's one thing I love about and I think it's actually behind you too, is that, who wrote I Will Teach You to Be Rich? Who wrote that?
Ramit Sethi.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I love that idea, because you were just summarizing the book to me one day, which I still want to read it. But, and he, when he says rich, he's really talking about using your money and spending it on what you want to, spend it on. So if to you being rich is buying a coffee every single day, well, then you plan financially around that, that kind of idea. And so that's really what you mean by successful. Mm-hmm. And I think successful people do this, and they do this often. They realize what their limiting beliefs are and how that plays out in their behavior. They're able to backtrack, slow themselves down, and kind of start over.
Yeah, right. And really the importance of working on this and trying to figure this out is because if we don't take the time to try and distinguish what is a lie that we keep telling ourselves versus what is the actual truth, and figuring that out and breaking that down, and then choosing to believe what's actually true rather than a lie that we've kind of told ourselves. The importance of that is that if you don't, you'll just end up getting stuck in the same problems, the same negative routines and consequences that you are already in. And that's why he makes a point to say that usually our current failures are tied to our past failures, because it's a limiting belief that we keep on believing we're making the same choice, mistake, etc. over and over again. Right. We continue to procrastinate on that project, we continue to miss that deadline, etc. Any of those cases.
Yeah, and that's the crazy thing about this, because if you look at the word insanity is doing the same things over and over and over again, but expecting different results. And oftentimes we do that. We do the same behaviors and in the same routines and in the same habits over and over and over again. However, we think, okay, I need to change. And we may, for a moment, short term, but then we kind of creep back into those places and into those spaces. And the reason why we don't is because we haven't drawn back. I don't think that we've looked far enough in the past to see where those insecurities lie. So before you and I hop on a roller coaster again, I need to connect that. I've connected that. And so I'm going to say, this is not a lighthouse. I'm strapped in.
Right.
And God protect me. Hopefully this thing will not come unstrapped when we go down that hill. And if it does, well, it's my time to go.
Right.
So
just because you're at a high elevation doesn't mean you're in trouble.
That's right.
That's right. That's the new truth right there.
That is.
To conquer that limiting belief.
Right. So you connect to your past, and that's kind of what he speaks to here in the chapter. People just oftentimes don't go back enough to see where those insecurities, fears, different things like that lie.
Right.
So
right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So as we open up the book here, again, if anyone's listening and they're interested in kind of diving more into limiting beliefs, I would look into Michael Hyatt if you are interested. Again, like I said, I think Living Forward is a great book. Your Best Year Ever is another great book. And then also Free to Focus. He might talk about limiting beliefs in all three of those, if I'm not mistaken, at least two of them.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I would say read anything by Michael Hyatt, honestly. So just look him up if you don't know who he is. Learn about him, follow him, make a connection. You never know what will happen. So
exactly.
Yeah. So we're in the book. Can I read a quote that I really enjoyed? Here towards the beginning, he says, "Who do you know who can't break the cycle of bad relationships?" Or he says, "Do you know someone who goes through predictable cycles of addiction and can't seem to break free?" So he asks several different questions, and he says, "Many of us are clinging with affection to the very things that are holding us hostage." I love that line. We're clinging with affection to the very things that are holding us hostage, whether that's a routine, a relationship, a job, a deeply held belief caused by childhood wound or something like that. And that's true. We are clinging to affection to these things. We may not realize it or look at it that way, but that's what we're doing.
Yeah. And he continues. He says, "It might even be fair to say that we're all being held hostage by something to some degree. Some of the most important work you will do is to identify who or what has been keeping you captive and to break free." Because we can't fix what we don't understand. And that's what this is about, figuring out what we don't understand correctly, so then we can then do something about it.
Right. And then he also says that, as we kind of spoke to earlier, we need to figure out what limiting beliefs we have developed that have us convinced that our ambitions are not available to us.
Right, because these things hold us back from our ambitions, our larger goals, the things that we want to do and accomplish. And that's what these limiting beliefs can do, is that they can hold you back.
Right, exactly. Yeah, so they... I love just how he writes that these limiting beliefs have us convinced that our ambitions are not available to us, but they're not. We know that limiting beliefs come in all different types of shapes and sizes, as he says, but they don't have to hold us back from our ambitions. We can move past them. It's just a matter of, do we want to put the work in to move past them and actually make a change.
He also says here that, just because it's a limiting belief now doesn't mean that it's necessarily something that's like evil or, or terrible. He says there are habits and beliefs and patterns that may have served us even at one point, but don't any longer. Mm-hmm. And those are limiting as well. Right. So there are things, like he said, a job or a relationship or things like that, they were of benefit to us even at one point, but maybe not anymore. You know what I mean? Because we're all, like he says, we're all growing and ever changing beings.
Right.
You know what I mean? If there's anything that's constant, it's change. And, changing sometimes, if we hold on to things that are meant to change, that can hold us back.
Yeah.
Even if it's a good thing.
Right. Yeah. And I'm glad you brought that out, because limiting beliefs does sound bad. I mean, you read limited beliefs and you think, oh, that's so bad.
Right.
That I would have a limited belief, but the reality is we all do, and those things are not necessarily bad things. That's why he includes this chapter in this book, so that we can begin to realize them.
Right. Because, you think limiting belief, and you think maybe the first thing that comes to mind is like, oh, I'm such a terrible person that I don't deserve success, or something that extreme.
Right.
But it's not always that extreme. Usually it's a little more subtle than that. And that's what he's getting at here, the subtle things too.
Right. Yeah. And he writes here because, of course, he does a good job of making sure that, we can easily think of other people and see limiting beliefs inside of them, but or outplayed in their life. But he also says that, I guess what I'm saying is that none of us, and then he says literally not a single person pursues their ambitions without having to face the moments in their past that have influenced their beliefs in deciding what they'll do about them. So literally no one. So on your path to your dreams and to your ambitions, whether they are big or small, because I would say a small ambition of mine is to get over my fear of roller coasters. That could be done in a day, right? So pretty small. But there are going to be, for every single person, there's going to be those moments where we have to face our past. So yeah, we got to do that.
Right. You have to recognize that you were scared at one point.
I was.
But that doesn't define how you live, how you choose to react to roller coasters from here on out.
That's right. And when I get to the top of that hill, what's going to leave behind, what's going to be left behind as we go down, is the memories of that lighthouse. We're just gonna,
and the fear, it's gone.
And the fear, it's gone.
Dude, I'm so excited. I'm like, I want to go right now. I don't even know if Cedar Point's open right now because of COVID, but I want to just go now.
We should when we go, we should film that and put that on our
right. That
story
would be great.
Somewhere.
That would be
like
great
that.
Podcast material right there.
Just don't lose your phone on the way down as you're holding it out. That would be funny.
A lot of people have. Have you seen those things, the nets catching things?
Yes.
Like there's like phones, wallets, keys, sunglasses, all that stuff, because people are crazy.
That's why I'm going to ask you to hold your phone.
Yeah. All right. Back on track here. He goes into the story talking about, his dad trying to keep him safe from snakes when he was a kid, and said if you're on a log, jump as far as you can away from the log as you jump off of it so that a snake doesn't reach out and bite you. That's basically the story that he's talking about here. Well, the thing is even now as an adult, well into his adult years, he still thinks of that every time he, even steps over a twig or something.
Right.
And he says the best way, though, to overcome a belief like that isn't to jump into a pit full of snakes. You know what I mean? That's not how you combat the fear. You know what I mean? That's stupid. He said it's to understand the belief and where it came from.
Right.
And so we have to figure out where it came from. We can't just it's not just saying, why am I scared to do this, and then just do it. Just it's not the shock therapy that, people say if you're afraid of spiders, well, just get in a tub of spiders or something.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like that's not what he means.
And honestly, it's probably going to stress you out even more, shock you even more, even make you more fearful if you just come into it without any sort of line or thought, without thinking back to where that, whether it's a fear or insecurity may come from. Once you can think back on where that originated from, sometimes we can see, okay, maybe it's because I was younger, or maybe it's just because of this particular situation. We can begin, in a sense, to rationalize, okay, this is what I felt, but logically this is what it looked like. And so that's what us reflecting allows us to do.
Right. Yeah. And our limiting beliefs usually take the shape of fear. That's what he's saying here, is that, he keeps jumping over twigs and logs and stuff because he's afraid a snake is going to bite him.
Right.
When there's clearly not even a snake underneath there. And he says, they take the shape of fear. This can manifest in different ways, though. It can manifest in procrastination, rationalizing, busyness, and a host of other subconscious tactics we employ to keep from chasing our ambitions. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, even, I don't know if he says it here or even in another, something else that I've seen before is, again, like even perfectionism or something like that. That can be a limiting belief that is fear-based,
Yes.
And me as an Enneagram 1, dubbed even the perfectionist in some cases, that's something that I fight regularly. You know what I mean? I think because I want things to be as the best they can, but sometimes it crosses the line into like, I'm afraid to put this out there.
Right.
You know what I mean? When I'm like, I still need to keep working on it. Still
Right.
keep tweaking this, doing this.
Yeah.
But really, I've made it about as I've hit that 80-20 principle mark. You know what I mean? I've got it 80% of the way there, and that's what you need. And sometimes I have a hard time letting go when it's time to let go of projects and work and stuff.
Yeah.
In the name of perfectionism.
Yeah. Yeah. If you ever take time to listen to Bob Goff, whether it's on another podcast or speaking or whatever it may be, he's very quick to do this, and will do this even in conversations with other people. Is he'll tell you something about himself, and he'll say, and this is where it comes from. And I admire that, because of course you look at Bob and all that he does in his life, and you would think that he's this intimidating person, not because he's not approachable. I mean, he puts his number in the back of his book. He's certainly approachable, but intimidating because things just kind of seem perfect sometimes. And for me, as someone who, and this is also a limiting belief, although perfectionism in your case, and wanting to get things done at a certain time and in a certain way, I'm so task oriented, and so such a busybody, with always seeming to want to do something, because even in the smallest of moments I have, I'm working on something just to check it off the list, so to speak. If I take time to reflect back on why I think I'm that way, I would say it's because part of my insecurity growing up was to please certain leaders in my life and to show them how much I could actually get done and accomplish. And so Bob is quick to do that too. So he lives that out in his life. And I think even with some of these other things, again, as you've pointed out with that good example, not all limiting beliefs are bad. But here we are. We are the way that we are because of certain situations in our life, and certain decisions and certain people we've had around us. And a lot of these things, when we first start them, we don't realize we're starting them because of a fear or an insecurity. But if we take time to reflect, we can see why, and then make the appropriate adjustments. But he says here, kind of towards the end, that if you want to clear your path towards your ambitions, you need to figure out what you're afraid of and why you're afraid of it. And that's exactly kind of what we've been practicing here, and
right.
Bob certainly practices all the time.
Yeah, he says that the fears, the reason why you need to pinpoint them is because they won't go away by themselves. So you need to be aware of them, and just like you're aware of them, they won't go away just because you're aware of them, but then you're just aware, so that you can proactively work against them.
Yeah.
And so then they don't have to subconsciously even control you.
Yes.
And that's why knowing about them, being aware of them, then you can take action against them when needed.
Yes.
And so that's what this chapter is about, and that's what he's talking about here. And that pretty much sums it up. He ends it with saying, you're not a hostage anymore. You know, once you're aware, then you can take control back. Yeah.
Yeah. He says, figure out your fears, kick them in the teeth, and get back to work. But we got to take time to figure that out. So that is chapter 19.
Yeah, chapter 19. Tomorrow is chapter 20. Give it a quarter twist. Yeah, and if anyone listening has any thoughts for chapter 19, and they want to share that with us, join the conversation. You can join at Read to Know Pod on all social platforms: Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, etc. And you can also send us an email. readtoknow@gmail.com, readtoknowpod@gmail.com.
Yeah.
And we'd love to hear from you.
Yeah. And you can also send us a rating and a review as well. We would love to see those on Apple Podcasts. You can take a screenshot of those or copy and paste and send it to that email address you just mentioned, because that will help us to be exposed to other people, especially as people look up podcast on books, because there are different podcasts based on different books and stuff like that out there. Even Bob Goff himself has a Dream Big podcast, which I believe is done now. Is he done with that, or is he still producing episodes?
I think he technically ended a season, so he's not done. He's just taking a break.
Okay.
So, but he will. I think he still plans to continue it. So.
Okay. Well, that is.
But there's a lot of episodes there.
Right, there are, and just something great to listen to as you're listening to this and reading the book and reading along with us. So anyway, check that out, and we'd love to see what you think about the podcast.
Right. Yeah. Thanks, guys, for listening. We appreciate it. We'll see you tomorrow for chapter 20.